Ladies and gentlemen, back to the epic Roster Watch podcast, brought to you by RosterWatch.com. I'm Alex Dunlap here, of course, with the Trashman. Sorry for not getting a podcast out on Thursday. Had a minor pet emergency. Didn't have to do with Trashman's little pug running around on camera as usual. Had to do with a little kitty cat belonging to my daughter. And thanks to all of our subscribers at RosterWatch.com for the fact that I was somehow able to pay a vet bill for an emergency surgery for a cat that must have swallowed a Lego or something like that. Tough scene around here. Trash man, what the hell's going on with you, brother?
Just wearing off my cocaine bear hangover.
Oh, did you see that?
Yeah.
We can't get much into it, but is it good?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm definitely interested in seeing Cocaine Bear for sure. Was the theater pretty packed?
Yeah, it was. I'm pretty sure it was a sold out showing.
That's so awesome.
It does for Cocaine and Bears what Snakes on a Plane did for Snakes and Planes.
Well, I think I'm. I think I'm more interested in the cocaines and the bears than I am in the snakes and the planes for sure. All right, so a bunch to go over today. I'll be heading out on Monday to go to the combine. We've gone through some of our storylines and off-season narratives for every division in the NFL so far, except for the AFC North and the AFC West. So we'll go through those. Also have a breakdown on Jordan Addison, the wide receiver transfer from Pitt to USC. And I'll be really interested to hear how Trashman sort of, after this initial evaluation, has him chalked up. To me, I feel like I'm in a spot where I'm in a sort of a wait and see mode as to where I'm going to have him amongst these top guys. I think a lot having to do with how he weighs at the combine. With that being said, we have Mark Hartsfield saying Trashman looks like a referee. I was telling him before the show he looks like Rob Lowe when he wore that NFL hat to the Super Bowl.
This is vintage.
Trashman, you always say that you could beat these NFL players in races, you could tackle them and stuff. None of that's true, but you could probably be as good a referee as half of these jackasses. I don't know. Okay. But hey, before we get to this, Trashman, there's two bits of NFL news I just wanted to ask you about, just get your thoughts on. Did you see the stuff from The Athletic saying that Russell Wilson, while he was in Seattle, was demanding that Pete Carroll and John Schneider get fired?
No, I didn't see that.
What do you think of that? Does this just go to show that Pete Carroll and John Schneider were just right at every turn about Russell Wilson?
Or, I just think they have a different philosophy about offense.
My philosophy is that Russell Wilson stinks and he's too short.
Russell Wilson was one of the best QBs in the NFL for years. It's hard to deny that he was.
It's hard to rub the stink off of last year.
At one point he was a very talented player. It's just when you have a guy who is a little bit shorter, when they lose some athleticism, it's hard to mitigate. How
wild to call for your coach and GM to be fired while you're still there. That's unbelievable. And then he apparently came out and denied this. But I believe The Athletic. I think that he's that kind of dude. The other thing was another thing I saw in The Athletic was they were doing the off-season sort of roundup for the Lions, and the writer for The Athletic said in the running back section, just let me just read this. So he says, thoughts: Jamal Williams and a healthy DeAndre Swift could be a quality backfield in this league, especially when you consider the offensive line paving the way for them. That's why Detroit running backs ranked 10th in the league. Okay, so I don't know what metric that is. League ranked 10th. What does that even mean?
I don't know.
Okay, so that's something else that. So I'm clicking on it. I guess The Athletic ranked all these teams from 1 to 32 at the various positions, and the Lions ranked 10th. Okay. So even if we assume Jamal Williams, who is a free agent, returns, Swift's rookie contract ends after the 2023 season, I'm not sure there's a future between the two sides, given the Swift's injury history and the money he'd likely want. Positional value might explain the low priority ranking, but I'd personally raise that number a few notches. So he says that it's only a 2 out of 10 as far as priority. The Lions have a good thing going, but it could be better if they draft a young back. So people are talking now for the Detroit Lions. The beats have coalesced in saying that they're going to bring back Jamal Williams. Now, what they're going to have to pay Jamal Williams is probably going to be kind of high, considering his agent's going to say you're bringing back last year's rushing touchdown leader. But for people inside the beat that sit in that locker room and think about this team so much and everything, like have the connections on the team, saying that there's not a future. Well, like what was that exact? Like I thought that was concerning. He said, "I'm not sure there's a future between the two sides." Does that concern
Sounds like
you?
My last girlfriend, huh?
Does that concern you at all? Like, as far as on our dynasty rankings, I don't have them pulled up, but I've been consistently saying, man, DeAndre Swift, I'm not sure that he needs to be somebody that we're talking about in this like top 15 picks of a dynasty draft. We had moved him down. That's kind of against consensus, right? Do you? I mean,
well, the thing is, I mean, like him not playing on the Lions isn't the death of DeAndre Swift, you know.
Yeah, it might actually not be bad for him, right? That's the kind of thing that I was thinking. So we have him down here. He's only going to be 24 next year, right?
Yeah, that's young. I didn't realize he was that young.
He was born in 1999, so this is 2023. He'll be 24 during this season. So if we kind of just look though, do you think that his injury history is something that's going to follow him to his next spot, and another team is just going to be just as reticent to you? Does reticent mean hesitant? Is that the same thing?
I think it's similar.
Reticent. What does reticent mean? How do you spell reticent?
RITICENT, I think.
Reticent, inclined to keep one's thoughts, feelings, and personal affairs to oneself, restrained or reserved, reluctant or unwilling. Okay, yeah. So will the next team be as reticent to start using DeAndre Swift in the way that we've always dreamed about him being used with the Lions?
Well, the thing
is that just the Lions being the damn Lions? Because we have seen this now this has been through two different coaching staffs.
I mean, we weren't worried about Swift injury history coming into the league.
Well, he had a little bit of some stuff,
but it wasn't a major.
He can't stay healthy in the NFL.
Hindrance. I mean, either can say Dalvin Cook or.
Well, I mean, people are pissed off with Dalvin Cook. I mean, you know.
But it doesn't. I don't think it'll keep him from getting a job somewhere. I mean,
I'm not worried about him getting a job. Of course, he's gonna get a job somewhere, trash man. What I'm worried about is, like, do we consider the fact that they're saying that he doesn't have a future in Detroit? So we're like, okay, as dynasty players, is that actually?
Well, the thing is, what we didn't like about Swift was the fact that he was going to be going up against Jamal Williams. And so. Him not being in Detroit,
he misses games every year. It was a concussion in 2023. He also had that hip that was bothering him where he would leave games early.
Okay, I mean, this might be a new opportunity for him. I feel like
in 2021 it was a groin strain. He also had the AC joint strain. 2022, what was it in this year? It was a shoulder. Wasn't it an ankle? It's been a lot of different stuff, man.
I haven't owned DeAndre Swift for a year or two now.
Okay, well, trust me, as somebody that has been in a few dynasty leagues, and as somebody who's a fantasy analyst, who's my job to monitor these things, I can tell you, he's been hurt. It's been a pain to use him, man, and it hurts so badly because they were willing to use him in high leverage situations down near the goal line. They were willing to throw him the football. You know, I mean, he's got the burst.
Well, I put him somewhere in the realm of an Antonio Gibson then, because I feel like they're probably a similar profile player at this point.
Well, Antonio Gibson is probably ranked like 50 spots lower in the dynasty top 250. So I think that with DeAndre Swift, we need to start thinking about DeAndre Swift more in the same tier as guys like Josh Jacobs, who'll be 25 this year, Javonte Williams will be 23 this year. I mean, if we're that, I mean, is that big a stretch to say no? He's not a guy who we need to be taking in the same area that we're taking guys like Amon-Ra St. Brown and Garrett Wilson, Travis Etienne, all these other guys. He's more like a guy who, once you get down to the Josh Jacobs and the Devontae Williams of the world, maybe that's when you start thinking about taking a DeAndre Swift, because he brings this, he brings the same sort of, troublesome spots to his profile as Javonte Williams. It's kind of a health thing with both of those guys. He brings the same sort of troublesome future uncertainty that Josh Jacobs does. Josh Jacobs has been a great producer. I think that, like, can you make a note in the next dynasty updates to get DeAndre Swift maybe down more into that sort of tier, given this new uncertainty?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. I mean, but does that make sense to you? I don't want to tell you to do something that you don't believe in. I mean, does that make sense to you?
Well, I don't care enough about DeAndre Swift right now.
Well, but that's the thing, Trash. Like our users care about the DeAndre Swift. They want to know how we.
No, I'm saying I don't care enough about him to mince words on it, because I don't know. I have not seen enough of DeAndre Swift.
That's the problem.
Recently, to have an accurate evaluation.
Well, that's the problem, right? Isn't that a big problem? There's a guy that's that people have in their top 10 of overall dynasty players that we have pushed below the top 15.
People have him in their top 10?
Some do. Yeah. I think if you look at the ECR and Fantasy Pros, he's right there in the top 10. People are still into DeAndre Swift, dude. They haven't given up on him. And I'm not saying that I'm giving up on him. I think he's got awesome talent. I hope, for the sake of a lot of my dynasty rosters, that he's going to be fine. But I don't think that we can legitimately be having a conversation about him versus these top 10 to 15 guys. Like, we can't be having a conversation about him versus Travis Etienne or Garrett Wilson or Amon-Ra St. Brown, or even like Saquon Barkley, who's going to be 26 this year, even with the uncertainty that he faces. I think even like Eckler. I think I'd rather have a 28-year-old Eckler. Maybe not. I don't know.
And dynasty, I'm not sure.
Certainly not ETN. Certainly not any of these young wide receiver studs. I think we need to be thinking about him more like a Josh Jacobs or a Javonte Williams. Both who are going to be 23 and 25, right there in that same age, same kinds of question marks. I think it makes a lot of sense.
That's fine.
Okay. And then especially with the fact that in the near term, we have the whole issue with Jamal Williams. That everyone's acting like he's going to be coming back. We got Cody in the chat yelling at your ass, trash man. What up, Cody? All right. Let's get on to some of these previews for the divisions. The kind of talk over some of the storylines, some of the things that we're going to want to ask these GMs and coordinate these GMs and head coaches when we get into Indy for these availabilities that start on Tuesday. Make sure and stay tuned here on the podcast feed and on YouTube for more of this content. Like I mentioned, we have our friend Cody Carpentier in the chat. I'll have a bunch of stuff with Cody, probably over on the player profiler side. We'll be doing our podcasts as regular there from Indy here on the Roster Watch side, and we'll probably have some that we do on both of those feeds. So it'll be some really good content. Make sure and keep up with us for it. Make sure to follow us on Twitter at RosterWatch. All right, Baltimore Ravens. As far as their salary cap situation, the Ravens are they're in good shape. They're $26 million over the cap right now. Of course, the big thing hovering over them is what the hell is going to happen with Lamar Jackson. New offensive coordinator, Todd Monken. How is that going to affect Lamar Jackson? Even if they do keep him, what do? Do you franchise? Like, we're not going to be able to ask.
Tyler Huntley's up as a free agent as well.
Who gives a shit about Tyler Huntley? Trash. I think the big.
I mean, it just adds to. I mean, it compounds the situation.
So I think, man, what I think is interesting is with these running backs, Kenyon Drake, Justice Hill, set to be free,
set to be close to 30 years old.
Yeah, Justice Hill's not set to be close to 30 already, is he?
No, but Kenyon Drake is.
Yeah. And as far as other fantasy relevant
Sammy
guys,
Watkins is. Demarcus Robinson is.
well, that's kind of interesting. I kind of like to ask those guys, what did you think about Demarcus Robinson? Is he anybody that you're interested in? Did you see enough out of him to where you're interested in bringing a guy like that back? I think for me, I just want to know. I mean, outside of Lamar Jackson stuff, we're going to get so many questions about that, and they're not going to answer any of those questions because we know where those two sides are. Lamar Jackson's mom wants him to take the Deshaun Watson contract, mark out Deshaun Watson's name, mark out Browns, write in Lamar Jackson, write in Ravens, and just set that contract down and have both sides sign it. And I can understand why. And it's why everybody was so pissed off when David Mulgeta did that deal. It's just like, Mulgeta, damn it. Like now we're all beholden to this deal. And these quarterbacks are going to come to us and say, look, my quarterback has had none of these issues that Deshaun Watson has had. He's had none of these allegations. He's been a straight shooter for you. He's been a league MVP or, whatever these quarterbacks have on their resumes, right? They've done this and this and this and this and this, and they don't have anything swirling around them. That's like, it's an unbelievably awesome storyline and narrative to be following. It's going to be one of the biggest storylines there is. So of course all the reporters are going to ask about that. What I'm going to creep in there and ask about is like, hey man, like was J.K. Dobbins last year, like was that just kind of like the sort of the kind of getting back to speed year? I think we might get a value on J.K. Dobbins next season, Trash Man.
No, I definitely think so.
If it turns out that maybe this last season was just kind of him getting back up to speed. The question is, was it a Gus Edwards just getting back up to speed kind of thing too? And if we're going to have to deal with this whole situation, right?
I mean, even if that is the case, I feel like if it's just the two of them, there'll be plenty to go around.
Dude, it's going to be a Todd Monken offense. I've always loved targeting players within that scheme. I'm not sure what it's going to do for Lamar as a passer, or whether, Rashad Bateman is automatically going to break out or all the rest of it. But I do think that it's going to be an upgrade there. So when I think about an upgrade, I think about a formerly elite prospect that we loved in J.K. Dobbins being sort of somebody that could finally maybe now be in more scoring position. And let me just look. Let's see. So I'm going to look on the big underdog. I'm curious to see where Dobbins is going right now. Oh God, dude, where do you think J.K. Dobbins' ADP is right now, Trash Man? We're gonna get him.
Is he in the 4th round?
No, he's at the 6-7 turn. We're gonna be getting some J.K. Dobbins for sure this year. All right, Cincinnati Bengals. As far as the cap space for the Bengals here, they have 3.36. Okay, so they have a bunch of cap space, 36 million in cap space. They have a bunch of stuff, man. They got a bunch of stuff they're going to need to pay for because T. Higgins is going to come due, right? Joe Burrow, of course, is going to be coming due. As far as the free agents,
no really notable free agents.
Hayden Hurst,
Samaje Perine. I mean, I guess Hayden Hurst. He's going to be 30.
Samaje Perine and Travion Williams. So that's just interesting. It's another year of the Joe Mixon hype. I think that probably what they'll do is they'll bring Samaje Perine back real cheap. They seem to like him. Yeah. I don't really have any questions that I think the Bengals would even ask of me. I think that I do think that Joe Goodberry has brought up this interesting point on Twitter. Who's Joe Goodberry's been on the podcast. He's been a friend of the show. Like how he's talked about how the offense would probably run better if they could have an elite tight end who they could then use more in the passing game, use in a more diversified way, and kind of maybe just move on from Tyler Boyd.
I mean, I'd say the offense works pretty well as is.
Fair enough. I kind of like the idea of them just adding a real good, trusty tight end for Joe Burrow, though. having those two alpha wide receivers. And just for fantasy, we'll make our projections a lot easier.
Bringing in Gesicki.
Oh gosh, yeah, that would be great. I would love that. Okay, Cleveland. So what is Cleveland? Oh, dude, I just where are you now on Kareem Hunt? I mean, is the shine finally worn off of him enough to where just people just aren't excited about Kareem Hunt in Dynasty anymore? Is that just the case? What's he gonna be, 27?
He'll be 20. He's gonna be 28.
Oh, geez.
Well, he's 27 and a half right now.
Okay, so he'll be 28 during the season. So I guess that's not really a question for the Browns. That's just me sort of asking you what you think of it. I guess with Kareem Hunt, he's going to be gone, right? He's going to be gone. Dearness Johnson's going to be gone.
You don't think they might bring Dearness Johnson back if they're losing Hunt?
No, because I think that Dearness Johnson before last season signed with Drew Rosenhaus, and I think Rosenhaus tried to drive a pretty tough bargain with that 1-year deal last year. I don't think they're going to go to. I don't think they're not going to go back to Rosenhaus and let him drive another deal like this. That's why they drafted Jerome Ford. To me, that's the big deal. Is Jerome Ford? That's the guy who we could be taking in best ball right now, who we should be targeting in Dynasty. To where Nick Chubb is getting a little bit up there in age. What is he? 27? Do you have that pulled up? Let's see. Chubb is going to be 27 this year. So, Jerome Ford is a guy who we didn't necessarily really love at the Senior Bowl. But do you remember Byron's film evaluation on Jerome Ford? Byron just loved him. And like the more and more I kind of studied and watched the film and stuff, I like Jerome Ford as well. And if that's like a straight up 1-2 with him and Nick Chubb, and Chubb gets
I feel like him and Chubb are pretty similar kind of players.
I get it. I do get that. But Chubb's going to be 27 years old, and he's going to miss games next year. And dude, in best ball, it's like a lock, dude, to take Jerome Ford at the end of these drafts. He's going to have games where he goes for 100 yards and 2 touchdowns. Any other?
As far as Hunt goes, I feel like. I'm happy for him to go elsewhere.
Oh God, me too. The only problem is though, it's like where does he go? Where in the league is there right now that just has a wide open thing where Kareem Hunt just comes in and he's automatically going to be a guy that commands just a whole ton of volume. There's none of those spots left anymore. Especially when you look at there's so many of these free agent running backs this year, man. And there's these free agent running backs that you don't even think about. Like when we talked about like the Devin Singletaries of the world and stuff like this. Benny Snell. It's like there's going to be a million of these dudes. Speaking of Benny,
pretty good in Miami.
Well, that's probably the dream, right? That's probably the dream. I would love him down there. I'd be a little bit worried about him down there with all the hijinks that he gets into. Okay, so speaking of Benny Snell, I think he's set to be okay. So on to the Steelers. So Benny Snell set to be free. Well, I mean, who else? What, Miles Boykin? I mean, geez. It looks like Mason Rudolph probably set to be free. Yeah. I don't know, man. I don't really know. I'm just, Mitchell Trubisky looks like they can save $8 million by cutting him. I think that's probably going to happen. I'm just with the Steelers, I've just been kind of disinterested in many of their fantasy pieces is from a redraft perspective. I think that my biggest interest is probably George Pickens, asking what they saw to him down the stretch this last season. Whether they feel like they have a ready-made replacement on the roster for Chase Claypool, or whether that kind of prototype of player is somebody who they're might be looking after in the draft. Like, what did he bring? What are you maybe missing without that guy? But I don't really know. Maybe I don't really want to. I feel like being the Steelers are kind of a to be determined team for me for fantasy, and it really depends on whether Kenny Pickett can continue to develop and turn him into an offense that can find itself in scoring position more often.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like maybe with the running back situation, maybe asking if they feel like Najee Harris or how he handled, being the bell cow back for another year.
No, I mean,
with Jaylen Warren behind if they like Jaylen Warren, what he was able to accomplish in his rookie season.
yeah, asking about Jaylen Warren would be a good thing, but we probably need to tighten up that question because if you asked it, I think Tomlin would look at you like you had an asshole. For
no, I would just, I'm just spitballing that one, but
yeah. Okay, let's move to AFC West. We'll start with the Super Bowl champion Chiefs. Yeah, a lot of interesting guys set to be free. McCole Hardman set to be free. Juju is set to be free. It looks like Spot Track has a calculated market value on him of about 3 years, $29 million total. So about 33 years, about 30. It's like $10 million a year. But he was good this last season. I'm not sure you bring him back, but I wonder what's going to happen if you don't have Juju back, you don't have McCole Hardman back. All of a sudden,
maybe no Jerick McKinnon,
maybe no McKinnon. It feels like they bring McKinnon back. He was really valuable to them down the stretch. Do you know the question? I can't wait to ask Andy Reid whether the ship has sailed on Clyde Edwards-Helaire. These coaches hate being asked whether the ship has sailed on somebody. Do you remember why I asked about whether
the chip has sailed?
Yeah. Oh, well, look, man. Do you remember when I asked about whether the ship had sailed on Laviska Shenault?
Yeah.
And I got this. Oh, Laviska, are you kidding me? There's a ship sailed on Laviska. We're gonna like next thing you know, they're trading him away to the Panthers. But has the ship sailed? Is he done?
It felt like they really leaned on Pacheco in that Super Bowl, and to actually pretty successful effect.
I want to know also, dude, what was Sky Moore like in practices? What did you see through the course of the season? We saw on special teams. I mean,
Sky Moore. I was never completely sold on Sky Moore, like some people. And I feel about Sky Moore like I feel about Xavier Hutchinson in a way.
This is going to be can they get rid of MVS? Can they finally ditch this dude? Could they cut him? Oh, yes, they can cut him. They can save $7 million.
I don't think they're going to cut him if they're also, if they're going to lose Hardman and Juju.
Cut him.
All three of them gone.
Dude, imagine this. Imagine a Sky Moore, Kadarius Toney. Is Justin Ross still on the team? You get Justin Ross going. Justin Watson. Just draft a few other guys.
Justin Watson's free agent.
Okay, so I guess they can't bring back. All right. I don't know. Well, why keep MVS just to keep MVS? He stinks. Guy's got bricks for hands, dude.
I guess he came up in spots for them. Showed up in spots for them. I feel like they'll need like a, bigger red zone kind of target. Moore is a smaller player. Tony's a smaller player. I feel like they're gonna want someone who can be that post.
The Chargers looks like, DeAndre Carter is set to be free. Jalen Guyton, a bunch of these dudes. Hold on.
Michael Bandy.
What is the story with, because there's all the talk about Mike Williams and, whether they can, with the wide receivers, they can afford to keep all these guys, about the restructure. I guess with Mike Williams, they would have to restructure. They can't get out until 2024 with him. What was it with Keenan Allen I want to look at Keenan Allen's contract because there's been talk about them.
What do you mean all these guys? You mean who besides Allen and Williams?
Yeah, so they can't get out of his until 2024 either. But oh god, they can get okay. So all the wide receiver talk is all about down the road, what's going to happen, because obviously in 2024, whenever Keenan Allen is 32 years old, he is going to represent a cap hit of $25.8 million, and only 2.7 of that is dead. So Keenan Allen's in his final year here with the Chargers.
I think they're going to see what they have in Palmer.
Yeah, I can tell you what they have in Palmer. I can tell you right
Byron
now.
might tell you different.
What they have is a jag. He's just a guy. He's just a guy. I don't care what Byron says. I've seen enough. I'm calling it. I'm calling the race. that this guy stinks. He doesn't stink, but he's a replacement level NFL wide receiver, which might be good enough if your quarterback's Justin Herbert.
When you're lining up next to Mike Williams and Keenan Allen, a lot of guys look like Jags.
Or it could make a lot of guys look better. Do you remember the JSN talk that we had? Like, is it what he didn't look like a Jag when he's lined up next to Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave. Some people say that he looked better because of that, right?
But then again, some people said he didn't, get the target share, the volume that, he might have otherwise.
Denver Broncos, new head coach, of course, Sean Payton. That's going to be – that's I think probably the biggest I don't know, is that the biggest news that Lamar Jackson, Sean Payton's the new coach of the Broncos. I'm trying to think, it's like literally there's storylines all over the place, but those have to be two of the biggest. I'm trying to look, who are the big free agents here who are fantasy relevant? It's like a bunch of.
Are we talking about coaches?
No, just the free agents on the Broncos.
It's going to be the running backs, I think, are the.
Well, they got Chase Edmonds in the Bradley Chubb trade, right?
Yeah, so I'm like Mike Boone, Latavius Murray, and Marlon Mack.
Oh, dude, they can save $5.9 million by cutting Chase Edmonds. So he is going to be cut for sure. But yeah, other than that, questions about the Broncos. My main question is how is Javonte Williams progressing, right? How is this thing going? Is he going to be ready to go to start the season? I think that's the biggest thing that I want to come away with here. I also want to hear Sean Payton. Like, how does he compare? How does he compare some of these wide receivers to the guys that he coached in New Orleans? Is Courtland Sutton or Jerry Jeudy, like, could one of them be like a Michael Thomas? Could you see one of them getting that kind of volume? I'll be interested to hear that kind of stuff. Okay, and then finally, before we get into the,
I'd be curious to hear about what he thinks about the tight end situation.
Which is, the tight end situation is Greg Dulcich. That's all there is to it. Do you think that Albert O still has any kind of chance to do anything?
I think they'd be remiss to give up on him.
I've given up on him.
Who haven't you given up on in this episode?
I haven't given up on Javonte Williams. I have not given up on him. Okay, Raiders free agents here. So Amir Abdullah is set to be free. Keelan Cole. Well, Mac Hollins. That's kind of interesting. How important is it to bring back Mac Hollins and his elite blocking skills in his one monster game versus the Tennessee Titans? But the big story here is Josh Jacobs. How big a priority is Josh Jacobs? What did he mean to the team? Last year, moving forward.
I think that's the big question. Bigger question might be like, are they bringing in veteran quarterback? Or are they drafting? Bringing new talent.
All the national media is going to ask about is about the quarterback stuff, and they're going to. I think they'll probably be pretty mum on that, But
I'm just saying that is the biggest issue, in my opinion.
Oh, sure. I'm talking about the things that I'm going to try and scamper up there and ask these guys about after all the serious, local beat reporters get done peppering them with all the quarterback questions.
Well, maybe ask them, do you think that Foster Moreau showed enough in his, action in Waller's stead to,
bring him back? Because isn't Foster Moreau free agent?
Yeah, he's a free agent. Bring him back.
Yeah, so I don't know. Did you, Trashman? You were the one who always
told
me you are done with Foster Moreau every single week. It's like, don't put him on the GFS cheat sheets. Don't talk about him.
I want to know, is there a winning fantasy team out there that used Foster Moreau?
Oh, like a millionaire maker lineup? Basis? No, absolutely not. But he was in the optimals. He was in the optimals for like 4 weeks in a row. There, it's so crazy. Yeah. So all right. So that'll be the Raiders. Let's talk about Jordan Addison. This has been not the toughest evaluation for me, but the toughest sort of slotting, because I rank these guys as I go through the evaluations, and then after a big event like the Senior Bowl, a big event like the Combine, I'll go back through with the new information that's gathered, and I'll go back through and I will I'll freshen them up. Like I'll tweak them. So for me, whenever I watched Jordan Addison, he's a dude who I watched a lot of his Pitt tape coming out of the 2021 season, because what happened with Jordan Addison at Pitt, he won the Blitnikoff Award as a sophomore with Kenny Pickett, right? Then he for his final year in college, he's like, well, I got one more year in college, but I want to make more in NIL money than I can here at Pitt, right? And so he opens up his recruitment. He was a national recruit. Of course, as I follow the college landscape, I'm looking into this guy. Even though I didn't watch many Pitt games, you're still, if you just watch SportsCenter at night after all the games are over and everything like that, you saw all the highlights of him. You were well aware of who this guy was. But whenever he became, he entered the transfer portal, all the big programs all over the nation were on him. It was a huge storyline. And I watched a ton of him then, and I thought he was unbelievable. I mean, I just thought he was an unbelievable prospect. He reminds me he reminded me a lot of Devontae Smith, just because of how he's got that same really slender body as Devontae Smith, that really same just sleek, smooth economy of motion and the way that he gets upfield. Now, I can't tell how fast he is. I am not sure how fast he is.
Well, that's one of the questions. There seems to be a lot of discrepancy on how fast he'll run the 40.
Yeah, I mean, well, here's the thing. Do you know what would surprise me? If he ran something above 4.5, and it would surprise me if he ran something below a 4.36. Anything in that, like anything between 4.36 and 4.5, I'd be like, yeah, that's kind of what it looks like. That's kind of what it looks like he runs, because there are runs that you can see of him. Sometimes not even with the ball in his hands, but when you can see him on some of these post corner routes with how fast he can get behind the defense. You say, whoa, man, like he's putting these guys on skates. Like this guy's just flying by them. He was a 2024 star recruit as far as his offensive market share metrics for this last year. Jordan Addison at USC, 17% of the team's receptions, 19% of the team's receiving yards, 19% of the team's receiving touchdowns, a total touchdown or a total production percentage on our meter here at 18%, which is pretty miserable. That's not good production in the context of that offense, especially when you consider it's a Caleb Williams offense, a dude who people are basically considering, they're already crowning as the QB1 for the next cycle. But as he said, he did win a Blitnikoff Award as a sophomore. Smooth, sleek, efficient route runner. He broke out as a true freshman, which is always awesome. But my question is, okay, so he was the beneficiary of basically elite level NFL, quarterback prospect play, at least Kenny Pickett and then Caleb Williams. So he's had really good quarterbacks feeding him the football the whole time, right? Yeah. Why did he fall off so much at USC? Was that just something about getting acclimated, moving across the country, learning a new system? I mean, it's a new offense. It's like everything was already everything's still kind of being installed and put together there under Lincoln Riley. How much did that have to do with it? And then the other thing I wondered about is his he's slight and he's slender and he's slim, right? And with Devontae Smith, though, I could squint and I could see myself, or I could see him winning some of these contested catches at the next level, because we saw it in college, right? We saw him win basically in every way possible in college. I just looked up the contested catch percentage last year. He had a 22% completion rate in 2022 on balls from Caleb Williams that were contested. He was better in 2021 from Pickett, but still not good. He was like 55%. When we talk about guys like, we talk about Jackson Smith and Jigba and whether he can only play in the slot and all the rest of this stuff. And then you talk about his like the quarterback's accuracy rating, or the NFL QB rating when targeting him versus man. You see the 90% contested catch rate, stuff like that. You're like, I don't have any worries about this. A 22% contested catch rate. I mean, that to me is pretty bad. The other underlying metrics all look pretty good. And when I watch him, I see a damn ball player. I see a ball player, and I'm just like, man, how can I get too low on ranking this guy? He's so good at the game of football.
Well, he's a great route runner. I think he's probably one of the best route runners we'll see here. And I think that's kind of what differentiates Devontae Smith. Devontae Smith, to me, more of a improviser than Addison, maybe.
Yeah, and used a lot in the screen game, whip routes, stuff like that. Little Steve Sarkisian loves drawing that stuff up, and that's what he did for Devontae.
Yeah, Addison. I mean, he's more. I mean, he uses his evasiveness. He uses his route running to get open, and maybe he just didn't face as much man and press as some of those other players you were talking about. And I feel like in this situation where he transferred to USC, I think you go to there, the quarterback maybe doesn't trust you as much in that first season. There's a lot of, I mean, to me, it may have helped him, make some NIL money, but as far as, his stock, I think it was kind of a misstep.
I'm not sure, because who knows what would have happened behind Kenny Pickett at Pitt, It could have been just like, man, my situation next year is not going to be like this was this year. Might as well make some cash out of it. I'm always going to have that 2021 tape. I mean, I think that the process was good in him deciding to make the transfer to USC. I don't think he had the year that he was probably expecting to, though, right? I'm not sure this, like, for me, I don't know how NFL evaluators are going to handle it. I'm not holding this last year against him, because this last year wasn't, I mean, it wasn't bad. If you watch the games, it wasn't bad. He still looks like a hell of a football player. Just as far as his market share numbers, they're nowhere near what they were. He also, as you mentioned, do you just want to go over your eval of him? Because one thing I did like that you mentioned is that his hands have seemed to have gotten better every single year.
Yeah, they improved every season.
And when he's at his best with his hands, he's downright magical. Like he can catch some balls, just way, out of the structure of his body, that you would just be like, man, there's no way he's ever going to catch that. I don't think he's long enough or tall enough to catch that. He's only 6 foot, 175 or something. That's the other thing.
175.
If he doesn't weigh in, I want to see him weigh in at 180 plus. I really do. I think that weigh in is going to be big for him. But what else?
Maybe. I mean, we've seen. I mean, like with Smith and with guys like Jalen Waddle, I don't think it's that big of a knock against him.
I'd like to see him at 180 plus. I worry about this contested catch stuff and everything like that. And that, to me, is going to be where I'm going to. I want to talk about where I have him ranked. But why don't you just give any extra thoughts that you have on his profile? Anything that you wrote up in the eval that you think is important?
I mean, little wasted motion. He's got really quick, decisive feet, lightning fast, getting in and out of his breaks and changing his tempo. He's really explosive when he makes his moves, and I think maybe that helps to mitigate some of that perceived lack of speed that may be there for some people. He's really quick to get to his top speed.
Yeah. Great acceleration, right? Great acceleration.
He's a really wide catch radius, despite not being a lanky guy. And he attacks the ball at its high point. Even though, I mean, maybe he doesn't do as well in contested catches, he does go get the ball. He lets the ball into his chest a little bit more often than I'd like to see.
You've complained about that with every guy. This group must be a group of body catchers for you, huh? It seems like
not everybody. I feel like that wasn't for Rice. I don't think that. Well, yeah, it was.
It was. You said about Quentin Johnston.
Yeah, maybe so.
I think this is the year of the body catchers for Trashman.
The year of the body. That sounds like a horror movie. Yeah. Oh, not Michael Wilson. I don't think Michael Wilson was the body catcher for me.
No. Michael Wilson's a great hands catcher. He's got great soft hands.
And what I really like is Addison has a nose for the end zone. 17 touchdowns in his Biletnikoff season.
Yep.
Which is really impressive for a player of his, build.
For sure. All right. So my deal is I currently have Jackson Smith-Njigba as my wide receiver 1 in this class. I mean, that's clearly subject to change. I don't think it's going to change, with Jordan Addison and Quentin Johnston, I'm having a really hard time deciding between which one of those guys I like as my wide receiver 2. And I think what it's going to be is it's going to be seeing these dudes at the combine, seeing where Jordan Addison weighs in. I look at Jordan Addison and I see a guy who I think is a better football player, but just doesn't have the attributes and the traits that Quentin Johnston does, especially in a class that's so devoid of them, that kind of elevates that value for me. And I think that Quentin Johnston does some things really, really well that I really love too.
Yeah, I mean, for me, like if we're talking about a number 1 receiver on a team, X receiver, I mean, Johnson is still that guy for me over all of these guys.
But what about if you're just looking for a guy that's going to come in and be an elite wide receiver for you? I
mean, it could be any of those guys.
It's hard to rank them. So like for you, is it just a matter of,
and that's why Johnston gets the leg up, because of his intangibles.
His intangibles or his attributes and his physical profile. Because when I think intangibles, I think, oh, he's a great guy. He's going to be a great locker room fit. He's going to.
No, I think about those things that aren't teachable, that are inherent in the player. I mean, and his build is certainly included in that.
So for you still at this point you still have Quentin Johnston at the top of the heap.
Yep.